have entered into the very first parallel session for today and the third parallel session for this two-day event. So here we are in technical session 9. Welcome everyone once again to the Bangabandhu Chair Dialogue Panel. We are in Hall 1. Namaste again. I am Nishma Tuladar. Very proud to and honored to be here along with such dignitaries. For the rapporteur session, we have Mr. Jiten Kumar, who will be joining from Indonesia for the reporting part. So without further ado, let's get into the main session. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming our very first co-chair, Professor Joyshri Roy, who's presently and inaugural Bangabandhu Chair Professor at the Asian Institute of Technology, Thailand. She's the Professor of Economics at Jadavpur University, now on Lien. She was the National Fellow of the Indian Council of Social Sciences Research and the Ford Foundation Postdoctoral Fellow at LBNL, Berkeley. She was in IPCC 2007 Nobel Peace Prize winning panel and coordinating lead author in the 4th, 5th, and 6th of IPCC assessment cycle. She has published more than 130 peer-reviewed articles, authored and edited books. Following, we have our second co-chair for this very session, Mr. Sheikh Tauhidul Islam. Dr. Islam is a professor and director in the Institute of Remote Sensing and GIS, Jahangirnagar University, Bangladesh. He has keen interests in critical geographical inquiries in the areas of environment, disaster management, and climate change. He has led more than 60 research projects and also been publishing scholarly articles in a number of avenues. With more than 40 articles published in peer-reviewed journals, his first book titled Climate Change in Bangladesh, A Closer Look into Temperature and Rainfall Data was published by the University Press Limited. So thank you so much, Honorable Chairs, for joining along with us. I'd like to hand over this session to the respected chairs. So we will be having 10 presentations. We will be having 10 presentations for this very session. The pre-recorded presentations will be played from the AIT site itself. The Zoom session is being recorded. The recorded session will be made available on request. Please mention to us if you have any sorts of objections or so. The technical session chairs, we will be announcing the presentations and the respective presenters. We will be having the discussion and Q&A at the very end of all presentations. So the participants can actually post their queries and questions in the chat box. The presenters are requested to keep track of the chat box and answer the questions that have been directed to you. If not, we will be having a discussion at the end after all 10 presentations are done. So thank you very much, everyone. I'd like to hand over this session to our respected co-chairs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neshma, for your introduction. And from AIT Thailand, wish you all a very good day who have joined us in this session. With my colleague, Professor Tauhidul Islam from Jahangirnagar University, Bangladesh, we will chair this year's Bangabandhu Chair Dialogue. Just to give you a brief background, in 2018, Bangabandhu Chair, Professor and Doctoral Research has been endowed to the Asian Institute of Technology, Thailand, by the government of the People's Republic of Bangladesh in honor of the father of the nation of Bangladesh, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. Since then, at AIT, each year, we try to organize multiple expert dialogues to understand, analyze, and derive implementable solutions in the context of Bangladesh. This year, we have chosen DRDS 2021 platform to reach out to a larger community, and it has been made possible with Bangabandhu Chair Endowment Fund. We have a plan for conducting this session. Professor Tauhidul Islam will introduce and invite speakers to make their presentation, and I would request you all to kindly post your questions for each of the speakers in the chat box. Please mention the speaker name while writing your question. We will take up the questions at the end of the session, and we will invite you, we will moderate the session so that you can get chance to respond to the comments and questions targeted to the speakers. To make this session a dialogue, we request your active participation in the chat box. Now I hand over to Tawhid to invite the speakers one by one to make their presentations. But as we already know from Neshma, that the presentations will be the pre-recorded videos. So Tawhid introduces one speaker, and then the video will be played from the master of the ceremony. Thank you very much. Tawhid, over to you.
So welcome to you, Dr. Roy. He explained the background and the role of on the chair in organizing this particular session, the 9th session in the 2nd International Symposium on Disaster Resilience and Sustainable Development. This is very critical for the country because country is forward towards achieving targets like 2041 when Bangladesh will be a developed country. Bangladesh got a target to achieve 13 targets by 2024 when the country will just be graduated in terms of from the least developed countries. So in this particular context, this session, I think it will be very useful to just receive some analytical results from the presenters through their presentations. As Roy mentioned that we are just having the pre-recorded presentations. We will be playing those, and the presenters will be waiting in the hall, and if the questions are there at the end of the presentations, they will be ready to just respond to your questions. So first of all, I would like to request Mr. Sirajul Islam to present his paper titled Development of a Disaster Risk Atlas and his methodologies. Please, Mr. Sirajul Islam, please come and...
Thank you and welcome to Bangabandhu Chair Dialogue Panel paper presentation entitled Development of a Disaster and Climate Risk Atlas in Bangladesh, Methodology for Quantification of Risk. I am Professor Dr. M.D. Sirajul Islam. My co-authors are Dr. Noor Nahar and Dr. Ghulam Sarwar. As you are aware that Bangladesh is a country highly vulnerable to natural disaster, mainly because of its unsuitable geographic location. The North Himalaya, so that all the water ultimately passes through Bangladesh, causing for flood, which is almost a recurring event. On the other hand, it is located in the apex of a funnel-shaped ocean system, the Bay of Bengal. So the Bay of Bengal belongs to the cyclogenesis, so that all the cyclone generated in the Bay of Bengal hit towards Bangladesh with the storm surges. Apart from this, we suffer from river erosion, drought, belong to earthquake zone, and is highly vulnerable to future impact of climate change and sea level rise. So in most of the global ranking of disaster prone countries in the world, Bangladesh used to be listed among the top 10 countries. As for example, German Watch last 2019 ranking, Bangladesh ranked 7. Same is for some other ranking as well. Now, ultimately, the impact of this disaster is the slow pace of economic growth and the aggravation of poverty level. In some studies, it is shown that the poverty-stricken part of the country is mostly disaster-prone as well. So the government has taken the issue very seriously, and in most of its policy document, including National Plan for Disaster Management 2016-17, they have explicitly mentioned that there must be some initiative to quantify or understand the risk level of government development projects at least. And this disaster management plan should be mainstream into the government development process. Actually, in Bangladesh, as a developing country, whatever the projects, government project we used to take, they are mostly exposed to nature. So natural disasters ultimately affect their longevity and productivity. So recently, we have conducted a study with the help of Asian Development Bank, where the conceptual framework of the study was three-tier. The first tier was the understanding of the risk level of a project, and based on the level of risk, either it should go through further CRVA, climate risk and vulnerability assessment, or go for directly go for implementation. And at the third phase, there must be some monitoring and evaluation. But now, this particular study or this particular paper is based on the first phase. There is quantification of risk. While quantification of risk, we have adopted a method. It is the IPCC SREX model. This is known as HEVR model. You know that IPCC special report on managing the risk of extreme events and disaster to advance climate change adaptation is a very special report which defined how to calculate risk from a natural disaster. Here, H means the natural hazard like flood, drought. E means the element that exposed to that hazard. It may be human being, crops, infrastructure. V, on the other hand, is vulnerability, maybe the factors, socioeconomic factors like poverty, education, or the lack of adaptive capacity like lack of embankment, lack of cyclone shelter, etc. And ultimately, the combined effect of these three actually will result in the risk level from a particular hazard. Now, for our case, in our study in HEVR, for entire Bangladesh at district level, we have collected the data of all these HEVR components. Here, under hazard, we have taken 12 hazards, as 2 of them are the future impact of climate change, which we collected from the downscaling of ensembling some GCM output. Hydroclimatic hazard, we took 8 hazards, and geophysical hazards, we took 2 hazards, as you can see, earthquake and landslide. The exposure unit, we have included 5 components as population, settlement, crop, infrastructure, and forest. And the among the vulnerability units, we divided it into 2 parts. One part is the socioeconomic vulnerability, poverty, education, general livelihood. On the other hand, depending on the types of hazard, medical facilities, cyclone shelter, embankment, irrigation facilities, lack of this adaptive capacity, we consider as a vulnerability component which may amplify the risk of a disaster. Now, how to define risk as function of HEV? This is a very difficult question. And because for the last 5-6 years, not many study has been found, and for Bangladesh, we do not have much study. And we found that no, actually equal weight for HEV is not justified. Rather, it should be put the maximum weight, and then further next it should be E, and next should be V, and the combination should be like this. We again did this risk analysis in 2 stages. First, we plotted exposure versus vulnerability with adequate weight, and some sort of qualitative scaling of a particular exposure unit or vulnerability unit from 1 to 5 as very low, low, moderate, high, and very high. Then, depending on this, we prepared a consequence value. This consequence value further presented against hazard with equal weight. And then again from 1 to 5, what should be the risk level? So you may say that how did we decide on this particular formula? Actually, it is done through an extensive or rigorous study of literature, expert opinion, the analysis by the research team, historical analysis, and so on. And we verified in the field through field visit as well. So that the best and most realistic risk figure at district level for Bangladesh can be prepared. So here other than the HVR analysis, while we are considering the exposure and vulnerability for a particular hazard, we again put weight for different components. For example, for flood, maybe infrastructure, crop, population, the highest exposure units importance should be given. On the other hand, for drought, forest, crop, population, these are given. Similarly, irrigation facility is very important as adaptive capacity for drought. On the other hand, for flood, embankment is very. So like this way, we have changed some sort of, for different hazard, different types of parameterization percentage weight we have given. For example, for earthquake, the maximum impact as exposure will be settlement, house, or population, minimum on crop, which may not be the case for drought. Similarly, here the medical facilities may be important. Here the irrigation facility. Like this, we have done some sort of parameterization or weight for every hazard and respective exposure and vulnerability. And finally, we prepared maps for each and every hazard and corresponding exposure in combination of these five exposure unit, vulnerability in combination of these all 8 vulnerability components. And finally, following the formula of H into 0.7 E plus 0.3 V, we prepared this risk map. As you can see that this risk map is different from hazard map because it's a combination of H, E, and V. And it is, to our understanding, it is a very realistic and at district level, spatial unit of district level risk map that we could prepare. So in a nutshell, I should say that under this study, we have taken an initiative to develop a risk atlas for all the 12 hazard. We have prepared map for hazard, exposure, vulnerability, and risk. And this risk atlas can be used as a screening tool for government development project. If a particular district, someone like to implement a project, first you identify what are the hazards it will be affected and what is the score for that, for the risk level of that particular project, and decide on what kind of disaster risk reduction or climate change adaptation measures you need to be adopted. The next stage of the study will go for economic analysis of the disaster risk that embedded into a particular project due to the future impact of climate change disaster risk. Also, what should be the cost of mitigation. Also, we'll try to downscale the risk atlas map to further smaller scale, like at Upazila level, so that the information are more precise and more useful. So that's all. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shajulam. It's a very nice tip and very useful in a time when we need this kind of information. And government of Bangladesh is currently this information as to know the lag behind regions, so that the development benefits are just being received by the people who are just living behind. So so this particular information will be very useful, but there are certain questions. I have a number of 2-3 questions, but we could ask those questions at the end of all the sessions. So may I request now Mr. Saqib, he will be presenting on the role of information and communication technology in Build Back Better in Bangladesh. Mr. Saqib.
Greetings everyone, hope you are safe and sound in this pandemic situation. I am Saqib Rahman Siddiqui Shubho, currently studying at the Department of Geography and Environment, Jahangirnagar University, Dhaka. Today I am going to present our study titled Role of Information and Communication Technologies in Build Back Better to Post-Disaster Recovery Practices, Insights from Bangladesh. The study is aimed to examine the role of ICT-based communication technologies to create a sustainable recovery strategies to build back better practices in our existing policy framework by reviewing literature, policy papers, and scientific and academic articles. The study is led by me with supervision and guidance of Professor Dr. Nurul Islam and Professor Dr. Sheikh Tohidul Islam. As you can see, Bangladesh faces a considerable amount of disasters every year and ranks 7 most vulnerable countries in the world according to the 2021 Global Climate Risk Index. The database developed by Louisiana University on disaster shows the reality of loss and damage done by the disasters. Here are some statistics from the damages done by the notable cyclones and floods. From this figure, we can see that the decadal we can see that the decadal comparison of disaster frequency and types in the country. As you can see, Bangladesh faces a considerable amount of disaster every year, and to fight against these disasters, Bangladesh has been developing its policy and action plans from the very first year of its liberation. Though at the early age, Bangladesh concentrated on immediate relief and rehabilitation measures, which later shifted towards a comprehensive disaster management system. And recently, Bangladesh faces a convergence of disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation and resilience. Information is essential during disastrous time. Rapid access to the reliable and accurate data enhances the effectiveness of responses. Nevertheless, faster communication and information sharing between stakeholders is vital to establish mobilization and coordination. During an emergency period and its immediate aftermath, the need for coordinated and high-quality information emerges. Technology, in the meantime, went through rapid development processes and became relevant in the sector by addressing the limitation. Through communication technology, information can be flow in 3 different ways, which is one-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many. ICT can be implemented in all phases of disaster management. However, in this article, we will discuss the role of ICT in disaster recovery and rehabilitation measures. Bangladesh introduced several ICT policies with initiatives such as access to information. Meanwhile, Bangladesh has reached widespread telecommunication coverage, 93% of the country's population covered by the 3G network, which also makes ICT relevant in the disaster scenario. As the Disaster Management Act of Bangladesh called for action towards humanitarian response for post-disaster recovery and rehabilitation, NPDM, however, aimed to meet Sendai framework, and Standing Order of Disaster also adjusts to effective recovery endeavor that's connects Build Back Better. However, practically, Bangladesh government promoting Build Back Better as a slogan after the devastation of Cyclone Sidr, basically building more substantial houses. We have, which is a misconception, and we have found some more anomalies and misconception and hardships from the literacy reviews, which show the recovery practices toward unknown degrees of uncertainty. A proper ICT-oriented strategy can provide real-time information and transparency and quick response from every authority and effective and an effective monitoring, evaluation, learning process towards the rebuilding a better society. Manakara et al. In 2019 proposed an international Build Back Better framework. In this framework, the proposed concept to achieve the Build Back Better recovery and rebuilding follows 3 different categories: disaster risk reduction, community recovery, and effective implementation, which have some subdivisions. Media coverage and ICT-oriented information exchanges may better connect with the outside and proper assessment of the damages. Thus, a locally oriented information system can be effective for producing solidity in community response. It is apparent in some community cases that an evolution from individual practices towards shared design digital community information resources. Social media groups and sites can become a hub for stacking the digital resources of the community, which can impose the recovery practice. Communication technology can track and improve the accountability and feedback for the community of humanitarian agencies. Geospatial technology, community computing, community-based disaster resource management can be a great tool for developing an effective early warning system and multi-hazardous land use planning and structural resilience. ICT technologies such as television, radio, and social media can be practical tools and in accomplishing disaster management education. Job matching websites show their effectiveness in terms of economic recovery. Furthermore, websites and hotlines for maintaining social reconstruction are effective. And social media can improve the social relationship between the vulnerable groups and other societies and build social capitals for the community and assuring social justice and resilience. This method can also play a vital role in the community and civic participation in monitoring and evaluation processes and making a transparent institutional mechanism. Cheeb and Komathe in 2009 proposed an extended TCM model for disaster recovery by analyzing extending disaster management models. The author suggested that technology programs implemented encompassing objectives to reduce existing vulnerabilities will foster sustainable development beyond disaster recovery, distinctive to each disaster-affected community. Bangladesh has introduced a computer-based system for social protection programs and post-disaster relief assistance with limited success. During two phases of the CDMP, Comprehensive Disaster Management Program, the project tried to implement communication technologies in disaster management scenario. The Standing Order of Disasters, however, defined the role of disaster risk reduction for various ministries and divisions. In terms of effective recovery and rehabilitation, National Plan for Disaster Management promotes innovative technology and forecast-based financing. For example, during the cyclone motion impact, CDMP2 distributed high bandwidth radios. These technology empowered a dedicated team of volunteers who had previously been in the last line for disaster information about the immediate disaster response and planning and preparedness for emergencies, helping infrastructure development assist to in the recovery period. The national ICT policy advocates ensuring access to ICT for all that there is a lack of explicit reference to integrate the poor and disadvantaged people. Though the policy suggests the shift towards a digital form of data, Bangladesh still produces hard copy reports and atlases presenting vulnerability assessment result. This process is lengthy and primarily based on paper. As Bangladesh faces an amplification in the disasters, it is essential to speed up the data generation processes for rapid movement towards a resilient future, before the next disaster strikes. At the local level, the relationship between the government and non-government organization is complicated, adding an extra layer of complexities. Additionally, misinterpretation of scientific jargons also hamper and sometimes brings negative feedbacks towards an initiative. However, any other socio-political causes and network deficiency also can cause policy failure and reduce the suitability of an initiative. To achieve the targets of standard framework for disaster risk reduction and making the build back better approaches mainstream and effective is essential. From the discussion, it is evident that integrating the information and communication technologies in disaster recovery scenario will make the rebuilding process better. As the literature indicates, the struggles of activating an effective recovery, Bangladesh faces problems grossly from four different perspectives: in slow data generation, socio-political deficiency, exclusion of community, and misconception. In this regard, this paper suggests some way forwards and recommendations for the science and society. That's all about our study. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Sakib Rahman Shubho, for your nice presentation. Basically, you just rightly mentioned that lack of recovery in the country in Bangladesh. We are just focusing on disaster response and relief. So without in the lack of recovery, that keep the people in vulnerable state, and they become the easy prey in the next disaster. So we need to just focus on that, and you have identified some of the areas. Maybe we'll just we'll just ask you some of the questions from the panel and also from the participants. At this stage, may I just request Fayad Rizal, he will be presenting on post-disaster recovery for building resilience, Bangladesh perspective. So it is also on recovery, but he will be connecting this particular thing with the build back better theory or the concept. Thank you. Rizal, please.
Hello everyone, I welcome all of you to the presentation of our paper titled Post-Disaster Recovery for Building Resilience, Bangladesh Perspective. I am Fayadesh Rizal, currently studying at the Department of Geography and Environment at Jahangirnagar University in Bangladesh. I'd like to thank my co-authors and for supervising me, Khandokar Mohammad Shariful Huda sir and Mohammad Nurul Islam sir, who are currently professor at the Department of Geography and Environment, and Sheikh Tohidul Islam sir, professor and director at Institute of Remote Sensing and GIS, Jahangirnagar University. So I want to start my presentation by showing this particular picture where a youth is protesting by writing in Bangla in his chest, which says "Tran noy, tekshoy beribat chai," which literally says in English, "We want sustainable embankment, not relief." And this picture was taken after people were heavily affected for the destruction of embankment in coastal region of Bangladesh after Cyclone Yash in May 2021. Previous recovery process might have saved those people from those. So we have 6 chapters in our paper. First of all, Bangladesh is one of the most natural disaster-prone countries in the world, and it has a long history of managing its disaster, and we have a very solid system. And this is the high time Bangladesh is trying to be a developed nation by 2014 and graduate from LDC by 2024. But every year, Bangladesh is facing a huge economic loss and infrastructure damage, which is one of the major barriers for development, and sustainable post-disaster recovery can minimize those enormous loss. And So in this backdrop, this paper tries to conceptualize post-disaster recovery along with the rationality and way forwards to implement those ideas. So in Bangladesh, recovery, unlike other phases of the DM cycle, is less understood and less practiced. And on the right-hand side, we can see a table where is total deaths due to cyclone is decreasing, but total damage is increasing every year. And on the left-hand side, we can see Landsat images where year after year destruction has taken place for not doing enough recovery. So before moving on to the solution, we have to understand what is disaster recovery. Disaster recovery is doesn't only just a physical outcome, but a social process according to Mileti, and we can upgrade the quality of construction, which incorporates the idea of building back better. And Smith and Wagner define recovery as a differential process of restoring, rebuilding, and reshaping of different elements. So recovery can overlap the other phases of DM cycle, like early response and mitigation. These are the parts which recovery can overlap. And another definition is the restoration and improvement where appropriate. And this definition indicates two different scope of recovery, like facilities, livelihoods, living conditions, physical infrastructure, and so other basic services, and so on. So long-term recovery is very much aligned with the idea of resilient and SDGs. Like from the definition of resilience, we can see the ability of a system to cope up with an emergency and then to recover from it. And long-term recovery also aligns with the SDGs, like Goal 1, Goal 11, Goal 13, which calls for action to end poverty and making human settlement inclusive, safe, resilient, and to call for action fight against climate change. And also it aligns with the target 1.5, 11.5, and 13.1. And in Bangladesh, we can see the impact co-evolved impact cycle of disaster. Like in 2020, we have seen at first we were struck by the global pandemic, COVID-19, and then flood happened throughout the country. And at the end of the year, cyclone Amphan hit the coastal regions. So at the end of the day, many people went for unwanted migration, and vulnerability and insecurity increased, and so many social problems evolved, like violence against women. And damage and loss due to disaster every year is huge. And on the figure, we can see, though cyclone is more deadlier, but flood is affecting more people and doing more economic loss. And from 2009 to 15, we can see that 2.3 billion USD and 3 billion USD due to property damage. And according to ADB, 10.7 billion USD damage and loss from the year 2013 to 2013. But at the same time, 2 billion USD funding was available, only 2 billion. So there's a huge gap. And every year we are losing 2.2% of our nation's GDP. And adequate recovery activities can minimize those damage and losses. So in the policy, current policies are incorporating the idea of recovery, like the latest in NPDM, which is produced on the vision of winning resilience against all odds. It incorporates one of the 4 priorities of Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, which says to recovery, reconstruction, and rebuilding. And SOD and DM Act also incorporates the idea of recovery. So then there's still many policy gap and institutional gap, like we have a top-down framework where local people cannot play their part, and the finance mechanism is very complex. If a distraction happens, then the recovery process takes a long time. And again, corruption and negligence in the responsibilities of those in charge is another major concern, and recovery is not yet well understood and incorporated in our policy institutional framework. So what to do? First of all, we have to think about a national framework for recovery. It will be a policy institutional arrangement, and it needs on the base of enough conceptual understanding, and it should be aligned with other policies like poverty reduction program and social safety nets program. And we have to implement the idea build back better. Pre and post disaster assessment is needed for better decision making, and we have to think recovery in the different scale, temporal scale, like short, mid, and long term. In the short term, we have to think about early response, and in the mid and long term, we have to think infrastructure building, economic restoration, environmental restoration, resuming the services and health services education and so on and so forth. And community participation is very much important. We have to think about decentralized and bottom-up approach. Where people can participate, it should be gender and disability inclusive, and local people often lack the capacity to communicate with national stakeholders. So capacity building is another important part, and technology integration is very much important. Early warning system is doing great for our country, but there's still room for improvement, and latest geospatial technologies like Google Earth Engine along with previous technologies like GIS and remote sensing can make a huge difference. So in the conclusion, Bangladesh is going through the paradigm shift from response and relief-based management to a resilience-based disaster risk management. So this is the high time we should conceptualize the idea of disaster recovery and incorporate in our policy planning, and it can reduce the damage and loss due to disaster and thus help our nation to be a developed nation by 2040. And last but not the least, for every $1 invested in resilience can save $6 in disaster response. Thank you so much everyone for listening. I'm looking forward to the questions.
Thank you very much, Fayad Rizal, for your nice presentation. You basically focused on the cumulative impact conditions, and also that indicates that post-disaster recovery is very much needed in the country, for which people can protect themselves from the next episode of disasters. But we don't have that particular policy framework, and you also very nicely mentioned a few points in the way forward section. So thank you so much. May I just request now Mohammed Warisul Hassan Nipun. He will be presenting on promoting rooftop rainwater harvesting for sustainable water uses in residential buildings for climate resilient city building, a case study of Rajshahi City, Bangladesh. Mr. Nipun.
Greetings and welcome everyone to my presentation. My profound and earnest gratitude to DRSD organizing committee and team members, honorable panelists and organizing chair, participants, paper presenters and audiences. I'm happy and lucky being a part of such an organized and beautiful virtual conference amidst the pandemic situation. I'm Mohammed Warisul Hassan Nipun, currently working as an assistant town planner of Rajshahi Development Authority, and I'm here to present our interesting study paper titled Rooftop Rainwater Harvesting for Sustainable Water Usage in residential buildings for climate resilient city building, a case study of Rajshahi City, Bangladesh. All right, now let's focus on our study paper presentation. First of all, we need to know what is rainwater harvesting. Rainwater harvesting is a technique adopted for collecting and storing rainwater for later use. Rooftop harvesting is an appropriate alternative to the water supply system, and it is the safest and cheapest of its kind. In densely urban areas, rainwater is available from the rooftop of buildings, and this water can be easily stored in a tank and can be used directly and also indirectly by diverting to recharge the aquifers through existing groundwater tapping arrangements, and after that we can easily utilize gainfully at the time of residential need. Well, the effects of population growth in the developing world and climate change have increased the stress on available water resources, and this is adversely affecting human, environmental and economic sustainability. These all call for climate resilient policies for sustainable development. The majority of households of Rajshahi City is facilitated with groundwater withdrawal. Moreover, Rajshahi Water and Sewerage Authority, RWASA, supplied water sometimes contains harmful ingredients like arsenic iron, which is below the standard level of drinking water quality. As Bangladesh is a country of monsoon climate, preserved rainwater can be contributed as an alternative to the extracted groundwater. The present study aims towards the development of a framework for rainwater harvesting for domestic purposes and estimates the appropriate size of the storage tanks and their cost required to fulfill the annual drinking and cooking water demand through rooftop rainwater harvesting in Rajshahi City of Bangladesh. Well, Rajshahi is the divisional and primate city in the northern region of Bangladesh, located along the bank of Podda River. And our area of concern, Upashahar Housing Estate, is the first planned residential area of Rajshahi City. The total population is approximately 14,000, and number of residential buildings in this residential area is about 2,384, where majority of the buildings are single-storied, about 55%. In this residential area, municipal water coverage is almost 56%, and annual average rainfall of Russia is 1,330 millimeter. Here we presented a short synopsis of our methodology we adopted for conducting our study. Around 100 single-story residential houses having different rooftop areas are surveyed. Field survey finds the minimum rooftop area of 75 square meter and maximum of 300 square meter for single-story residential houses in our study area. The rainwater harvesting potential for different sizes of rooftop is estimated. The monthly rainfall data is collected from Bangladesh Meteorological Department's Russia station. The annual rainfall quantum in Russia is less, and hence the gross demand of a family cannot be fulfilled by rainwater harvesting, and at the same time, number of days of rainfall is another constraint. However, we have estimated the size of water tanks needed to fulfill drinking and cooking water demand of 15 liter per capita per day per person, and their costs required to fulfill the annual drinking water demand through rooftop of different areas are also done. In our study, we estimated the sizes of water tanks to fulfill the drinking and cooking water demand of 15 liter per capita per day, and the overflow from tanks for groundwater recharge. The month-wise status of quantity of water available in water tanks of different capacities are also estimated. A sample collection for 100 square meter rooftop area is shown in the table. From the calculation, we found that in a single story house having 100 square meter rooftop area, 7,000 liter storage tanks size is required to fulfill the drinking and cooking water demand of 15 liter per capita per day. In such case, the probable overflow of tank for groundwater recharge would be approximately 85,675 liters. However, the cost estimation of rooftop rainwater harvesting for the surveyed single-story houses of Russia is shown in the table. The unit cost of water which can be harvested from rooftop area is calculated by considering 30 years of serviceable life of rooftop rainwater harvesting system and water tank. The salvage value of the system is assumed 25%, and annual maintenance and repair cost is taken as 5% of the capital cost. In the below figure, the plot of cost of rooftop water versus rooftop area is shown. The horizontal line shows the market cost of water is 75 BDT per kilowatt. The rainwater harvesting cost is less than the market cost of water and is constant after 150 square meter rooftop area, that is taka 70 per kiloliter. If it is considered that 20% quantum of the water recharged into ground can be reused by means of existing groundwater tapping arrangements, then the cost is convincingly less than the market cost. From our analysis, chemical and biological analysis of harvested rainwater, we found that the requirement of water treatment is needed only for the pathogenic organisms, as most other quality parameters are within the WHO guideline limit. However, we have also analyzed the cost benefits of rooftop rainwater harvesting. The cost benefits analysis of rainwater harvesting reveals that a considerable reduction, almost 77.4% of municipal water supply is possible if rainwater harvesting is done. Since rainwater is available for free except for the nominal cost of some basic treatments, the annual cost of water bill would be reduced to more than half if rainwater harvesting system is installed in the residential buildings. Our study reveals that great potential for exploitation of rainwater harvesting from rooftops is possible in Rajshahi city, and drinking and cooking water demand can be easily fulfilled from rooftop harvesting. A maximum of 113 cubic meter rainwater can be collected from 100 square meter rooftop, provided that all rain falling on the surface is collected. Therefore, government support is essential in encouraging the public to install rainwater harvesting system. Grants would be needed to encourage people in harvesting the rainwater. Moreover, it is an urgent need in Bangladesh to implement sustainable water strategies for increasing the water efficiency and addressing safe water demand to combat the water shortage problem in the future. That's all. If you have any questions or queries, feel free to ask. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nipun, for your very nice presentation. And basically, in Bangladesh, we have been talking about rainwater harvesting for the last, I think, 20, 30 years, but that was not that much successful compared to other options. I think your cost benefit analysis and very detailed work on your Upashahar housing state, that will be very good suggestions that the policy planners may take from your presentation. So I think this is very good, fantastic presentation, Mr. Nipun. Thanks once again. Now, may I request Mr. Ashkur Rahman to present his paper. The title is Socioeconomic Vulnerability and Mental Health Risk during the lockdown periods of COVID-19 outbreak in Bangladesh, a perception-based analysis of young adults. Mr. Rahman, please present your paper.
Hello, everyone. In last week, I had a conversation with an undergraduate student who said he might be graduated and started a job by this time, but he has been waiting to be graduated since 1.5 years, and still he doesn't know when he will. He also mentioned about his worriedness about the future career, and his depression is hiking day by day. Now, why do I tell you this story? Because our study exactly is based upon these type of stories. So we try to find out the socioeconomic vulnerabilities and mental health risks during the lockdown periods with the help of the perceptions from young adults. I would like to thank the organizing committee of this wonderful symposium and the audience. As we all know that who already declared COVID-19 as a public health emergency. Bangladesh government has also closed all educational institutions since March 2020, and also it imposed a ban on the mass gatherings. The below figure actually shows the COVID cases rate in Bangladesh, and from this figure we can observe that still there is an increasing trend of positive cases in Bangladesh. So it is a bit worried for us all. We all experienced an unprecedented economic and social crisis all over the world, not only in Bangladesh, but all over the world. The 20 million youth labor who are waiting to enter into the job or who are already in the job, their wages are going to be moderated or they are going to have no income. About 37 million students are affected also due to a national-wide closure of educational institutes. And they also don't know then when their institutions are going to be opened. So they are now falling in various types of anxiety problems. We wanted to assess the mental health status of young adults. Those age range is between 18 to 35 years in urban areas during the lockdown period. Secondly, we wanted to investigate the prevalence of anxiety level in different socioeconomic groups. And finally, we wanted to determine the associated socioeconomic drivers of the participants' mental health conditions. So we set 3 research questions based on those objectives. First of all, we wanted to answer that what are the mental anxiety scores, and we did it with the help of GAD-7, which I will tell you a bit later. Secondly, we wanted to answer the questions, is there any prevalence of mental anxiety in different socioeconomic groups? And if the answer is yes, then further, we wanted to know which socioeconomic drivers are significantly associated with mental health issues. So how did we collect our data? We actually collected data from 484 participants during March to April 2020, and we did it with the help of Google Forms, and we circulated the forms through email or other social medias like Facebook and WhatsApp. And what was in the questionnaire? Actually, the socioeconomic profile of the respondents, along with 7 items generalized anxiety disorder, which I told a bit earlier, GAD-7 scale, that was also administered to measure the prevalence of the anxiety level of the respondents. So how did we analyze those data after getting? First of all, we used a descriptive statistics to show the socioeconomic characteristics and the prevalence of anxiety level. Secondly, we used inferential statistics like the Kruskal-Wallis H test to determine the mean differences between the different groups with different perceptions. And finally, an empirical model was built to use that determine the associated socioeconomic factors of respondents affecting their mental health conditions due to COVID-19. So, what did we find? From figure 2, we actually see the respondents' sex, 56% were male, 44% were female. And figure 3 actually denotes the respondents' occupational status. Only 3% were found unemployed among the respondents, and majority of the respondents were students, 67%, and 30% were employed. Figure 4 actually shows the mental health status of the young adults. And from this figure, we can see that only 17% respondents were having minimal anxiety level, but 22% were having severe anxiety level, and most of the respondents were having mild anxiety or moderate anxiety. So figure 5 and 6 actually tells us about the anxiety level in different socioeconomic groups. To get a more clear view, I would like to describe these figures, what it actually tells us about. There were 6 socioeconomic groups, and we divided each socioeconomic groups into 3 subgroups. For example, if we pick worried about livelihood security, there were 3 subgroups. First of all, one who were not worried about their livelihood security, secondly, who were worried about their livelihood security, and who were sometimes worried about their livelihood security. So there are 3 subgroups. And accordingly, we divided all these 6 socioeconomic groups into these 3 subgroups, and we tried to find out the mean rankings of those subgroups based on the anxiety level. So what did we found? The anxiety level and occupational status were not significantly different, but however, the rest of the socioeconomic characteristics of the respondents and their mental status were significantly different, because from this figure, we can see that all the p-values are below 0.05 or 0.01. And if we see the mean rankings, the lowest mean rankings were found the non-user of social media, because nowadays most of us actually use the social media and get the news of COVID-19 through this platform. And worried about livelihood and educational uncertainty ranked in a similar trend. Figure 7 actually tells us about the odds ratio of different socioeconomic drivers against anxiety. And we found out protective factors and risk factors. 2 protective factors we found. First of all, living with family members, because their odds ratio is less than 1, and being worried about livelihood security. And we found 2 risk factors, likelihood of drug addiction and being worried about educational uncertainty. And we also found 3 groups p-value were below 0.01. Figure 8 also shows the similar kind of results, and we found 2 risk factors, that maintaining social distancing and uses of social media. Those young adults who are worried about their educational uncertainty during this pandemic situation, in contrast to those who were not worried, was conducive to increase the mental stresses, because the p-value was found below 0.05, and the similar results were found with the likelihood of drug addiction and maintaining the social distancing, because these 2 factors was also favorable to increase the anxiety level in response to not associated with drugs or not to maintaining the social distancing. So in conclusion, we can say that in Bangladesh, the initial lockdown during the COVID-19 pandemic increased the mental anxiety level among the young adults, because a good portion of the respondents suffered from mild to moderate anxiety level. We also found some protective and risk factors. Those are directly related with the anxiety level, and among different socioeconomic groups indicated that where our government needs to focus to reduce the mental health issues during the pandemic, and the government should also take proper initiatives and include services like online mental health service or offline in regular healthcare systems to manage mental health risks arise from COVID-19 outbreak. So that's it. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Ashikur Rahman, for your very timely presentation, the mental health condition in relation to the COVID-19 outbreak and the lockdown issues. And you indicated in your paper that the more moderate and severe, that I think together gives us a figure more than 50%. It says that 54% people are just in the moderate and highly or severe mental anxiety conditions. So it is really a condition that we need just take into concern. So this is a very good paper. Thank you so much for your presentation. May I now request Sibak Kumar Shaha to present your paper titled Household Migration as a Unit Following Cyclone Aila in Bangladesh, Financing of Migration Costs and the Role of Social Networks. Mr. Shaha, please present your paper.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to my presentation. I'm Shivakumar Shaha, Associate Professor, Department of Sociology, Shahjalal University of Science and Technology, Bangladesh. The title of my presentation is Household Migration as a Unit Following Cyclone Aila in Bangladesh, Financing of Migration Cost and the Role of Social Networks. Research context. Cyclone Aila hit the southwest coast of Bangladesh on 25 May 2009. It affected 11 coastal districts and over 3.9 million people and caused 190 deaths and approximately 7,100 injuries. Aila severely affected Khulna and Satkira districts. Dakop Upazila and Koira Upazila were the two worst affected upazilas of Khulna district. Aila caused massive displacement of the affected people. Aila also caused widespread migration. Majority of the affected households sent one or two members to work outside temporarily after Aila. In addition, a few households migrated as a unit after Aila. Research questions. This presentation addresses two research questions. These are: how did the households that migrated to Khulna city as a unit following Cyclone Aila finance their migration? And what assistance did the migrated households receive from their social networks in financing their migration to Khulna city and after migrating to Khulna city? Methodology. The data were gathered through in-depth semi-structured interviews with 32 households that migrated to Khulna city from the Dakop and Koira Upazilas in Khulna district following Aila. In addition, 7 focus group discussions and 14 key informant interviews were conducted in the 4 worst affected unions of Dakop Upazila and Koira Upazila. Study area. You can see the map of the study area. You can see Khulna City Corporation, which is located on the upper side of the map. You can also see Dakop Upazila, Koira Upazila, and 4 unions of Dakop and Koira Upazilas. These are Kamakula Union and Shutarkhali Union of Dakop Upazila, and Maharajpur Union and Uttar Betkashi Union of Koira Upazila. Time of migration to Khulna city following Aila. Out of 32 interviewed households, 5 households migrated from their villages to Khulna city within 1 month of the event. 6 between 2 and 3 months, 5 between 4 and 5 months, 9 between 6 and 9 months, and 7 between 10 and 30 months. Financing of migration costs. Households usually migrated with only the money needed for transportation and a few days food cost after migration. About half of the interviewed households received assistance either as aid or loan from their social networks to finance their migration. Social networks in Khulna city. Out of 32 interviewed households, 25 households had social networks in Khulna city. 18 households had relatives, while 7 households had people they knew either from their village or through previous one in Khulna city. 24 households contacted their social networks in Khulna city before migrating to Khulna city. All households which contacted social networks in Khulna city received assistance after migrating to Khulna city. Types of assistance. More than half of the interviewed households received assistance relating to accommodation, food, and finding employment. Other households received assistance relating to either accommodation and food or finding employment. This suggests that social networks provide safety nets for migrants. Migration and environmental change or climate change in future in Bangladesh. The findings of the study bear implications for understanding the relationship between human migration and environmental change or climate change in future in Bangladesh. The findings indicate that the poor households, if interested to undertake migration in response to the environmental change or climate change in future, may not be able to do so due to the lack of resources for meeting the cost of migration, despite their vulnerability to environmental change or climate change. The findings related to financing migration by the households within their own district also suggest that the predominant form of migration in response to the environmental change or climate change in future will be internal migration. Most households, if interested to undertake international migration in response to the environmental change or climate change in future, may not be able to undertake international migration due to the lack of resources to finance international migration, except for migrating to neighboring countries, which will usually be done illegally. A substantial number of migrated households experienced improved economic conditions as compared to their economic conditions in the villages before ILA. Migration has the potential to serve as a key adaptive response to environmental events and climate change in future if migration is viewed as an opportunity rather than as a problem, and thus supported in a planned way by institutional measures. Such support would enable people to avoid forced migration and to achieve a better outcome in the new destination. References. Thank you for listening to my presentation. If you have any questions, I would be pleased to answer them.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dr. Shivak Kumar Shaha, for your very effective and presentation that I think touches many avenues or the areas like urbanization, disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation. The results will be very useful for many sectors, many policy planners working in different sectors. You also focused on how social networks could just play vital roles as safety net to the communities. And also you just identified that poor communities might not be able to just migrate as part of their adaptive process. So this story that you just bring out in light based on the ILA related migration, that is fantastic. I think one of the good papers, and we need this particular information, and we also know the process, how things are happening at the ground level. So thank you so much once again, Mr. Shivak Kumar Shaha. May I now present Ms. Champa. She will be presenting on assessment of flood hazard in climate extreme, considering reverse fluviomorphic responses. So can I request Champa to present your paper?
Welcome everyone. Today I am going to talk about the development of dynamic flood risk model, in which we are saying a risk-based warning tool for rural flood management. On behalf of the team, I am Dr. Shampa is presenting our research, and we are from Institute of Water and Flood Management, Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology. Before going to the core of the presentation, firstly, I would like to share with you our presentation outline. Firstly, I will share the background and the gaps of the existing flood warning system in Bangladesh, and then we will discuss about the concept and the development of our DFRM model, and finally, we will say the validation of the model. So, if we see that in Bangladesh, basically population density is very high. And this high density makes the most flood vulnerable country of Bangladesh. Due to the high population density in Bangladesh, basically any natural disaster is going to be very hazardous. And the existing flood warning system is quite old in Bangladesh. The flood forecasting and warning center, FWC, have 54 stations, which gives flood warning at 3, 24, 28, and 74 hours for short duration, and indeterministic forecasting for 3 to 5 days. And they are basically circulates the warning in the form of the how high the flood or the water level is flowing above the danger level. Danger level is defined by definition that the level above which the flood can be dangerous or damage, can cause damage to the local community. And if we focus on the technical limitation of the FWC warning, that danger level is not basically understandable to the local community. And also there is a lack of risk vulnerability and inundation information in local level. FWC's generated inundation map is basically used for the national level flood forecasting. And in the community level, the existing dissemination strategy goes up to union level, no community level dissemination without any media or radio and television or mobile phone. In this context, we developed one dynamic flood risk model, and which is a risk-based warning tool, which basically couples to the hydrodynamic model and community-driven flood vulnerability and exposure data, and generates flood inundation hazard vulnerability map. And most importantly, using our tool, we can generate risk-based flood warning info, which is completely a new thing in Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, basically, during the flood, there is no flood warning. This slide shows the key structure of the model, our DFRM model. Here we are using the FWC information, and in community level we are using community capital and vulnerability data, and using the time series data, water level, discharge, and dam and land use pattern. We did numerical simulation in two-dimensional form, and all the information are stored in DFRM model. And using this information, the model generates the flood area, depth, velocity, duration, which are the hazard component maps and vulnerability maps. And I said previously that lastly the risk and warning number. This is the interface of the model. For the end user, focusing on the community, we keep the interface is very, very simple. That the for end user just need to put the water level for the river, which area they want to see, and the information whether the flood is increasing or decreasing. And the model gives the information of inundation hazard, vulnerability, warning, and risk. Now I will going to share with you the methodology or the background work of the model. As we are saying that firstly we did 2D numerical simulation using the past 28 year scenario of the river. Every time we use that time's river discharge, water level, and the river bathymetry and planform data. For the topography of the we use Google Earth elevation data, and the cross section for the river we use BWDB measure data. And from the simulation we extracted the hazard parameter, that what depth, velocity, and duration, and we are then we calculate the hazard using this formula. And we assess the vulnerability using the UNDP Sustainable Livelihood Framework of Pentagon of Assets. And vulnerability basically comes from the community's capital. And in capital, we basically calculate the capital in physical, human, social, natural, and financial capital using these indicators. And finally, we calculated the risks based on the hazard, vulnerability, and the exposure data. We generate the warning info. Here the warning is level 1 to level 5. Level 1 and 1 is no warning. So level 1 is the lowest warning and level 5 is the highest warning, where the damage is very big or the risk is very big. We tested the performance of the DFRM model for the flood 2020. You may know that flood 2020 is one of the severe flood in the recent decades. It crosses the severe flood threshold, and duration was more or less very high. So we validate our DFRM results using the information of flood 2020, and we use the synthetic aperture radar, the SAR images, secondary literature, and community level field data. This slide shows the comparison of SAR images and our DFRM results. You see, the blue color dots are basically the analysis from the SAR images inundation extent, and the red color it shows the model results. Here you see in the accuracy or the percentage of error of the model varies from 5.4 to minus 9.6 in pre-monsoon, monsoon, and post-monsoon seasons. And for the community level hazard parameter, we are selected 3 community. In one is in Oshtomik Chor, which is inside the river, and 2 community is in Raniganj Union, that is Fourier Hut and Purbo Batiapara. Fourier Hut is it's not embanked area, but Purbo Batiapara is embanked by the BWDP embankment. And we see in Oshtomik Chor, in monsoon season, the people say this table is generated from the people perception and DFRM data, and people say that the inundation varies 0.3 to 2.8 meter, where we get inundation from DFRM greater than 2.4 meter, and in Fourier Hut it varies from 0.3 to 1.7. We get inundation up to 1.4 meter from DFRM. In Purbo Batiapara, community said it is 0.3 to 1.4, and we get from 2.08 to 2.4 meter, and the duration is varies 90 to 90, 60 to 90 days, and we get from the community model results 96 days. Here we are getting a little bit higher inundation days, because in Purbo Batiapara is there are many canals inside the Purbo Batiapara, which is linked hydraulically linked with the river. So if water enters into the into this area, it basically takes time to drain. And for vulnerability, for the comparison of the vulnerability, we use OCHA and NAWG data, and they said that during the time of flood 2020, the vulnerability of Kurigram is slightly lower than the vulnerability of Jamalpur district, and in our model result we see in Kurigram the vulnerability is varies nearly 40 to 45, and for Jamalpur we get around 50 to 60. And for the from the community data, we see that for Oshtomik Chor, the model generated vulnerability was 39.64. Fourier Hut was slightly higher vulnerability, and Purbo Batiapara was a relatively high vulnerability. Because in these two areas, the infrastructure is higher than the Chor area, and from the field data, we also see that in Chor area, the physical vulnerability is very low, same as the financial vulnerability, but the human vulnerability and the other vulnerability is very high in the Chor area. And this figure shows the risk perception based on household survey. It is basically quite difficult to compare the people's perception and the model result because model gives our numeric value and the people's perception are basically gives us something range. But we are trying to compare it that people say in based on household survey, it says the ostomy store is basically more vulnerable than the other, more basically more have more risk. Sorry, than the other two areas. And our warning information say that warning is higher in ostomy store most of the time during the FLAT 2020. So this I share with you our validation of the model. So I can conclude that we develop a community-based tool that we are calling DFRM. We are not claiming that we solve every issue in our one model, but we are trying to add some value to our existing warning system by adding some risk-based warning information. But the main concept is this: we need to disseminate the model information or the risk information to the community people properly. So we are suggesting one protocol that can use for the dissemination of the DFRM information. And we are also suggesting some volunteer groups to the community for the dissemination and FLAT preparedness using the DFRM information. Then lastly, we acknowledge our National Resilience Program of Bangladesh government and UNDP for funding these research, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Champa. You basically represented a big and very strong team from WET, and this is one of the best team in the country now, just working in this. And this is very significant that you just scale down the flood or early warning, and the systems that we have in hand now. And the importance of the findings is that the institution is there. The FFWC indicated that flood focusing warning center. They could, if the results they are convinced with the findings and the method that they proposed, they are ready, I think, to disseminate this information through multiple channels, and it will be very useful for the local communities. And this is the first time, I think, a comprehensive work we have seen to just pass the risk warning to the communities at the household level. So different channels where you just use many different kinds of very useful data like ASR, the synthetic aperture radar data. What is very important because during the rainy days when we just get inundated areas in different places, the cloud cover creates huge problem to get the information from the optical remote sensing. So thank you so much once again, Ms. Champa, for your nice presentation and your colleagues in the WET. So may I request now Hasina Akhtar for presenting your paper. The title of the paper is Livelihood in Normal and Stress Situations, Fluvial Flood-Prone Urban Poor Communities in Dhaka, Bangladesh. Ms. Hasina Akhtar.
Hello, I am Hasina Akhtar, doctoral student of the Department of Development and Sustainability, SARD AIT. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present my work in this platform. My presentation topic is Livelihood in Normal and Stressed Situations, Fluvial Flood-Prone Urban Poor Communities in Dhaka, Bangladesh. Fluvial flood has become a regular event in Dhaka city for two reasons. First, intense rainfall during monsoon. Second, rapid urban growth with insufficient drainage systems. In this city, poor disaster management systems and ineffective coping mechanisms increase the flood risk. In Dhaka city, about 40% of the city population is living in slums, and they are mostly living in low-lying platform areas. New slum or expansion of existing slum in high-risk areas is a matter of concern as the slum dwellers are unable to cope with the additional shocks like pluvial flood because of their limited adaptive capacity. Therefore, it is important to take initiatives for risk reduction measures and preparedness mechanisms. For taking these steps, we have to know the answers of the following questions. What are the levels of livelihood status of the urban poor household in a normal and stressed situation? Is there any relation between a normal livelihoods and a stressed livelihood status? Based on these two questions, we fixed two objectives for this study. First, to explore the level of status of the urban poor households in a normal and stressed situation. Second, to understand the difference and the relationship between normal livelihood status and stressed livelihood status of the urban poor households. We selected two slum settlements based on their physical location and frequently affected by pluvial flood. We used triangulation methods for collecting data and followed several steps for analyzing data, including statistical analysis. For livelihood analysis, we used capital concept for sustainable livelihood approach of DFID. These are the variables and indicators we used for defining the livelihood status in terms of capital in both situations. The profile of the study areas revealed a significant differences between the slums in terms of many aspects. Most of the cases, Mirpur slum was in better position than the Rainwater slum. However, household size and academic attainment did not show any differences between two slums. In normal situation, majority of the households in Mirpur slum were living with moderate to high livelihood status in terms of human, financial, and physical capitals, whereas very low or low to moderate livelihood status in these three capitals were seen in most of the households in Rainwater slum. However, there was no significant difference seen in both slums in terms of social capital. In stressed situation, majority of the households in Mirpur slum were living with low to moderate livelihood status in human, financial, and physical capitals, whereas very low to low livelihood status in these three capitals were observed in most of the households in Rainwater slum. There was no significant differences seen in both slums in social capital status. From t-test results, we found that a significant differences between the two situations in terms of capitals. Similarly, correlation showed that the capital status were positively correlated. So we found three major findings from this study. First, the livelihood status of the urban poor became more deplorable from a normal situation to a stressed situation. Secondly, Significant differences were found between normal and stressed situations. And finally, positive correlation were seen in capitals between the two situations. Therefore, the result suggests that the households might have adopted preventive measures or think about preparing themselves against future hazards, since the livelihood status in both situations were positively associated. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Hasina Akhtar, for your very good presentation. This just gives us a kind of very clear idea about the livelihood conditions of the poor people who are just living in the urban areas in the normal and the stress situations you just compared to those situations. So we basically generally talk about the floods happening in the large floodplains or delta plains, but generally not talk much about the urban flooding, and you just brought into into our focus about those issues, and also just you connected the capitals, 5 capitals coined by the feed, and you also mentioned that the 5 capitals are correlated. So this information and the results will be very useful for the conference and for the policymakers in the country. Thank you so much once again, Hasina Akhtar. May I request now the last paper that will be presented by Marjan Akhtar. She will be presenting on issues relating to Rohingya communities in Bangladesh. The title of the paper is Refugees, Humanitarian Agencies, and Sexual and Reproductive Health Interventions, an investigation using culture-centered approach in Rohingya. Marjan Akhtar, please present your paper.
Hello everyone, this is Marjan Akhtar. First of all, I would like to thank the Bangabandhu Chair Dialogue Panel for providing this opportunity to present our research, which is on refugees, humanitarian agencies, and sexual and reproductive health intervention and investigation using culture-centered approach in Rohingya refugee settlements of Bangladesh. I would also like to introduce my co-authors, Dr. Joy S. Chatterjee, Professor Kyoko Kusakabe, Dr. Yoji Pal, and Professor Jayashree Roy. Reproductive health and sexual and reproductive health rights is an intersectoral development issue reflected in twin sustainable development goal targets aimed at achieving universal access to sexual and reproductive health services. Research indicates that the sexual and reproductive healthcare challenges for refugee migrants populations are higher compared to the general population. Further, women are disproportionately disadvantaged due to traditional gender roles and norms that hinder their service-seeking behavior. In the context of Rohingya refugee camps, previous research has found that the health vulnerabilities of women and girls is not only dependent on the complex social determinant, but is also related to how the agencies understand and respond to their needs. The objective of this paper is thus to understand how and to what extent a gender perspective is integrated and mainstreamed into the working of humanitarian organizations that are delivering sexual and reproductive healthcare services. Using a gender lens, it provides critical overview of the organizational factors that shape the design and delivery of holistic sexual and reproductive health services in refugee camps and the emergent gaps. This study applies Mohan Datta's culture-centered approach theory to analyze how the organizational structure, culture, and agency of the healthcare workers together shape the organization's sexual and reproductive health work. Together, the intersection of culture, structure, and agency depict the constraints and challenges to health experienced by participants, their sense-making process in understanding these structures, and their day-to-day practices of negotiating these structures. Previous studies on culture-centered approach has shown that how the overlooking of cultural beliefs and structural barriers in interventions can lead to the stigmatization of the target beneficiaries, or how the communities understand the meaning of health, which is shaped by the culture and structure in which they are embedded, or similarly shape both health delivery and health-seeking behavior. So the goal of this research was to study how do this culture, structure, and agency of humanitarian organizations working in Rohingya refugee camp influence the design and implementation of their sexual and reproductive health services. Here, the structure incorporates the composition of workforce, decision-making process, and the communication pattern. The culture relates to the set of beliefs and practices which impact their definition of sexual and reproductive health and the design and delivery of services. An agency, on the other hand, is the action of the healthcare staff to enact change on their way of, or the way of their doing their day-to-day work, negotiating the culture and structure of the organization. The health disparities in sexual and reproductive health are deeply rooted in the inequity, gender inequity, which exacerbates the health outcomes, especially for women and girls. Further, the health interventions need to be enacted within and beyond reproductive health matters to improve this situation. A gender mainstreaming approach in health involves incorporating the understanding of gender disparities and its implication on health consequences in the process, training and intervention of health sector organizations and health service providers. Using a qualitative method, this study compares and analyzes data from 24 in-depth interviews with managers and frontline workers from 3 different organizations with diverse focus and organizational structures. As you can see from the left side box that women-dominated frontline structure was found comparatively however, comparatively fewer women was seen in the management level. There was a mix of both men and women in the frontline of Organization B, which is a national organization, and Organization A and C are both international organizations. So in case of communication pattern, gender had an influence because the staff, which in case of organization A and C, as you can see on the left side, shows that there were no gender mainstreaming training. So the communication process was not very sound with their superiors. However, in case of organization B, there is a good horizontal communication among male and female staff. And there was a stricter hierarchy in decision making in the management level, but less hierarchy among the frontline staff. The gender stereotypical culture was prevalent in all the 3 organizations, and the lack of gender training and mainstreaming within the organization was also found as a vital reason behind the gaps in knowledge and understanding on gender-based approach to sexual and reproductive health among the staff. The organizational structure and culture impacted the way how the service providers perceived and exercised their agency. Because of the hierarchical nature of the work, the frontline workers felt incapacitated in their own capacity to make larger change in the structure. However, the management level staff reported having higher agency. So the influence of structure, culture, and agency on sexual reproductive health shows that women are considered as target beneficiaries for sexual and reproductive health services by the organizations as those who are marginalized and vulnerable. The gendered understanding of reproductive health as women's health issue potentially leaves out men and their differential sexual and reproductive health needs. Employing women field staff in their front line needs and addressing the needs of women beneficiaries is a positive gender sensitive approach. However, internally, the organizations have not transformed to be more equitable and empowering for the staff. So the findings indicate that there is a need for capacity building and commitment towards gender mainstreaming and gender transformative approach across different organizational levels, donor management, and field workers. There is an importance of creating mechanism for feedback and communication between frontline workers and management, and enhance the capacity and agency of frontline workers to contribute to our sexual and reproductive health intervention. Also, there is a need to address health needs for all genders in the community as part of a holistic gender transformative approach to sexual and reproductive health. In case of particularly the Rohingya refugee context, the structure and culture need to be taken into consideration instead of only focusing on biological factors to reach towards a more holistic approach in sexual and reproductive health services context. Thank you for listening to the presentation.
Thank you so much, Ms. Marjan Akhtar. That was a different but very useful presentation that you made on the refugee issues, and you just found a very significant some results and using the culture center approach theory. So there is a question from my side. Basically, maybe we could just ask you later at some point. So thank you from my side. I would like to thank all of you for very nicely presenting the papers. The quality of the papers are very high, very good, and I think it could directly just guide the policy planning in the transitional phase of the country. Bangladesh is just trying to achieve the 2041 goals, and I'm sure about it. And Dr. Roy will definitely give us more insightful thoughts about that. These particular results will be very useful for policy making to achieve the 2041 goals. So from my side, thank you so much. Maybe I could just come back with some questions, but I'm just hand over the mic to Dr. Roy for your assessment and the comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm really impressed by the presentation and their quality. And also, thank you, Tawhid, for facilitating the whole process. But the only thing is that I'm just seeing in my clock that it's only 6 minutes left before we need to close this session. So what I would suggest is that I would just take up few. I'll summarize a little bit, and then I'll take up 1 or 2 questions, and we will have to close it because there will be other sessions also, but that's okay. So what I just feel is that I really liked the presentations and their quality, because what I observe is that there are, if I categorize them in different ways, the different papers, I would say that there are some papers which take a helicopter view, which we say, which simply means that you build a model and try to see from above that what is going on the ground and try to understand it. So it's a helicopter view, right? So there are model building and very rigorous model building, very interesting chat is going on. I can see between Shirajul and Shampa, and I'm really impressed. And also the other thing which I see is that there are many studies which have looked into the ground level truth. So what is happening on the ground to the people, their assets, and how they are coping up with the different disaster levels, whether it is pandemic or flood related or any other kind of disaster, or maybe scarcity of water. And then I see another kind of presentation which talks about that what institutions need to do more and where the institutions are failing, right? And so how they can be strengthened. As it has been rightly said, if by 2041, Bangladesh has to achieve the developed country status, they need to do better in each of the indicators so that they can really come up with a developed country, institutional structure, governance structure, technology, and knowledge. And history says this is possible. So I do not doubt that Bangladesh, whether they will be able to do it or not, but I'm sure that they can really do it, and given the whole different programs which has been taken. The other thing which I noticed is among the studies is that the technology development, how the technology development can push this whole agenda of development. So I can see that, that I'm really impressed to see that institutions within Bangladesh are strengthening their capacity in terms of knowledge building, their understanding building, their data set building, and their own skill. So these are all local skills, right? So which is really impressive. And I can see that how this is really on the path to the higher development status in next 20 years. Definitely it will be next 20 years. I'll not be surprised if I see the development much earlier also. So now what I would suggest is that I could see that there are several interesting, discussion which is going on in the chat. Just I would highlight that what I really liked in the questions is that, I can see that maybe some of you never met within your country to discuss or share what you are actually bringing on the board and what you are doing. And you can see the complementarity here. So I think that this discussion, say for example, on methodology part, between Tawhid, Sirajul and Shampa, I can see that this network would definitely grow after this. And then you can mutually strengthen your capacities, right? So, and also what I just felt is that, say, study in Khulna and study in the other one, I just saw that where the flood related problems, so in the Dhaka city. So all these which are trying to understand what can be the risks and how people are coping up. So these will frame policies, and these can actually be connected to these model-based studies. So I can see that, we can think how we can bring you all together to more such dialogue so that you can enrich the policy framing. So we can provide a platform where you can talk together more and come up with a maybe status paper, a white paper for a Bangladesh government, which can be communicated at different levels. So I can see a lot of possibilities. And I know I can give time to others, but I want to take as a chair of the session some privilege of just asking, just saying one or two things, because we have crossed the time. So just wanted to say that this is really great, and I will stop it here. We can be in touch through email because the next section will start. Thank you very much. Neshma, sorry, I could not manage exactly on time.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, our session chairs, for handling the situation pretty well. Apology accepted, Professor. You did not need to, but your presence made the session even more learning experience, got even more interesting here. And we had a wonderful chat session going on as well, with explanation and everything, which actually took up the time. So with further discussions, we come towards the end of the technical session 9. We had a very interesting discussion within Bangabandhu chair. And sure, we will be heading for a 15-minute break. So see you soon again in Hall 1. We will be having technical session 13. So thank you to all the participants for the 10 presentations, as well as thank you very much, co-chairs, for your time. Thank you very much.